Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Paul, and today we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the Cosmere. And this video is all about 5 things you should know if you are going to embark on the epic journey that is beginning to read the Cosmere. For those who aren't aware, Cosmere is a large shared fantasy universe written by author Brandon Sanderson. Now, he's known for quite a few things, one of the most prolific writers of the last few decades, finished The Wheel of Time, largest Kickstarter of all time. Yeah, the guy has done a lot. And because of that, there is a lot of material, and there's a lot to know before making the commitment, or, as point number 1, making the investment. If you get that joke, you get it. That's the first thing to know. There are many, many works in this universe. It is quite an investment. I think people could hearken it to starting One Piece. Maybe it's not quite that big, but there are a lot of books. There are a lot of stories. There are a lot of worlds and characters and magic systems. There's a lot to keep track of. And just know that there is a rather large investment that comes with that, whether that be financially or of your time. It's one of these things that once you start to dive into it, I would hazard a pretty good guess that you're going to want to continue to go through all the way. So just be aware. Seeing friends and family, committing to work-life balance, school, yeah, those things are not. Those aren't in the cards for you. I'm sorry. I'm going to warn you in advance. Once you start to get involved in this, whether it's lots of trips to your local bookstore or library, you're going to be committing a lot of time to reading because there's a lot to talk about and a lot to read in this awesome universe. And once you get into it, it's really hard to stop. Point number 2, thing that you should know. Who is Hoid? Hoid? Who is that, you might ask? Well, depending on the name, depending on the series, depending on the world, Hoid is a de facto narrator and thread that ties a lot of these worlds together. He's kind of a Where's Waldo of the Cosmere universe. He's someone who is involved in basically every story in some way, shape, or form, and he takes a more or less involved role, sort of depending on the story. But if there's ever a situation where you're scratching your head and you're going, is that it is. It's almost certainly is. Like I said, it's a bit of a Where's Waldo for this particular character. So definitely stay on the lookout for our good friend Hoid. Point number 3, you may occasionally have to study. I said this at the top. There's a lot to know and there's a lot to remember, and it's okay to take notes. It's not a university course. It's not a lecture. It's not a class. But for some people, whether it's, what allomantic metal gives you this power? It's like, wait, what a second. What is hemalurgy again? Wait, what surges do Windrunners have access to again? There is a lot to keep track of, especially when it comes to the magic system, because every single world in the Cosmere has at least one unique magic system. I say at least one. One world has 3. Again, it's a lot to keep track of and a lot to remember, and if sometimes you have to occasionally scribble down or jot down notes, that's totally okay. Often there are these little appendices that can give you a little bit more information, especially in things like Mistborn, just because there is so much meat on that magical bone. But absolutely don't be afraid to just jot some notes down in your phone if you have trouble remembering. It's less so about the characters, though maybe in Stormlight because there are quite a few POVs, but more just sort of about the world in general. There are also a ton, a plethora of online resources like the Coppermind online. They'll be wary of spoilers if you are venturing into those places. If you're looking to get a little bit more info on something, particularly story related, I would be very careful in that regard. Now, Brandon Sanderson does a very good job of introducing these things to you in a way that is not daunting. Like, I don't want to make this seem like, oh my God, I don't want to do homework. That seems so silly. He does a very good job of introducing this. But if you're someone like me who read like 15 Cosmere novels in the span of like a month and a half, sometimes things get jumbled. So it's not the worst decision ever occasionally to take down some notes, or at least just know that you're going to go back and refresh your memory sometimes. Now, one of the big things about the Cosmere is that the future is fiction, specifically science fiction. These books start as fantasy books. They are very, if you look at like The Way of Kings, very traditional high fantasy novel. Big, sweeping vistas, huge casts of characters, epic battles and monsters and mages. It's very traditional high fantasy. Mistborn takes that down a little bit, makes it feel a little bit more grounded. Some of the other works go in very different directions, but the overall direction of the Cosmere is forward, particularly forward through time, specifically to the space age. That was always the goal and the vision of this universe, to take it from something that started as a low fantasy kind of setting, very much sword and sorcery, and take it to something where people are flying around in rocket ships and spaceships and, have talking computers. That's the future of where this is going. So if you're someone who really only reads sci-fi and think, okay, well, maybe I'm curious, maybe I want to go back and explore more fantasy and see where this leads. Or if you're someone that does traditionally read more fantasy, know that before you do get involved in this, the eventual goal of this, maybe not for every single piece of work, but for a lot of it, will be heading towards sort of this galaxy-wide space race, because that is really what the Cosmere is. It is a collection of planets, real planets, in a section of space. It's it's sort of in the name, but they really do exist as planets orbiting around stars. That is a real thing. It's not some sort of conceptualized, where one world is in a completely different universe or something like that. No, there's some place that you can physically traverse through space with a spaceship, which is pretty darn cool, and not something that I can really think has been explored too much in sort of a fantasy universe. Now, last but not least, there's going to be a whole lot more Cosmere. I mean, Sanderson is a prolific writer. I mentioned the Kickstarter at the bat. He just, out of the blue, was like, I wrote 4 more books. Here they are. They're on the shelf behind me. I wouldn't expect anything like that ever again, but he is expanding not only the works every single year, but he's bringing in more writers to work with him. So far that we know, not in the Cosmere, but it's been pretty heavily implied or explicitly stated at this point. I don't watch all his podcasts or anything. That he is going to be bringing in more writers to do more works in the Cosmere, which is super cool. So not only is he going to be writing, but he's bringing in other authors that he trusts to help continue to build this vision. So that means there's never been a better time than now to start reading. Like I said, a lot of people akin this to One Piece. There's 1,000+ episodes to watch, but the best time to start reading is now. I mean, there's only going to be a higher mountain to climb the longer you wait. Why do I sound like I'm selling drugs or something? I swear I'm not. Maybe a little bit, but no, the best time to start is now, 100%. There is such a great body of work in front of you and so many fantastic places to start that really, things are only going to continue to advance from here. And there are so many cool stories left to tell in this universe. If you're someone who is into fantasy and hasn't sort of taken this journey yet, I definitely recommend it. And a lot of people often ask, well, where do I start doing this? And it's funny, I scripted this video actually a little while ago, but since I scripted it, Sanderson actually came out with his own reading order. I'm not sure it's good. It's a good reading order. I don't 100% agree, which is silly because he wrote it. So he is the definitive authoritative voice on the subject. Absolutely feel free to just go watch that video if you want the reading order. However, I get a little bit more specific in mine for a couple specific reasons. So let's talk about them. I think we both agree, start in the same spot. Start with Mistborn. Era 1, go through those books. They are absolutely fantastic. I think this is where everybody should start. I then recommend getting sort of Elantris and Warbreaker out of the way. Again, Elantris is probably my least favorite of the Cosmere novels. I liked Warbreaker okay, was my absolute favorite. They just sort of give some additional pad and sort of world building, but it's sort of just like get through them, get them out of the way. They're pretty snappy reads. They're not huge books. And then take the plunge into the Stormlight Archive. Now, these are the big weighty tomes of the Cosmere, and I would read books 1 through 3 and their respective novellas. So these little novellas that sort of go in between. You can buy those either as standalone or you can buy one of them as part of the Secret History. Speaking of Secret History, I would then read that after book 3. Then I would read Mistborn Era 2. books 1 through 3, but I would save The Lost Metal. Then I would go back, read Rhythm of War, and then read Lost Metal. Now, the reason I recommend it in this way is because I didn't do that. I didn't read them in this order. I read The Lost Metal before Rhythm of War, and there are actually some spoilers for Rhythm of War. I mean, maybe some people might have pieced it together. I didn't. I legitimately got spoiled on something on this, and I haven't really seen too many other people talk about it. I was kind of irked, honestly. I still remember I was in a hotel room, and I remember being annoyed that no one had mentioned it. From there, I would then go through, he recommends Tress especially earlier. I don't. Tress takes place chronologically much later. Things are going to be a little bit more confusing. Yes, people say Tress is standalone, but it will feel a lot better to read if you read it once you've basically read the rest of the Cosmere. It's a super fun romp. It's one of my favorite of the Cosmere books. But I would read that when you've basically read everything else. And then I would do Yumi, and then lastly, The Sunlit Man, which we all sort of agree this is the most recent book in sort of the whole universe chronologically. And then in that, like I said, you can do, there's a bunch of short stories that are contained within the Secret History, which are super, super cool. And you can go piece those in one at a time kind of wherever. But I would sort of recommend it, reading it before Era 2. So that's it. The Cosmere, I say that's it. It's not. I mean, there are people who spend countless hours just trying to piece together these little Easter eggs. There are characters in these books called world hoppers, and there are ones like our dear friend Hoid who jump between stories and figuring out, wait, is this person with a different name? Wait, is that character actually a crazy immortal being sent by God? Oh, hey, these are the kind of questions that you get to ask yourself if you dive into the world of the Cosmere. And there are a ton of people like myself who are super into these books. There is a massive community around it. That's the secret sixth thing to know, is that you're going to be among good company. Brandon Sanderson does. At some point, I'll make the trip out. He does his Dragonsteel convention, which is just like all things, mostly Cosmere, but all the stuff that he does. There's a whole convention around this, and it's only going to continue to get bigger and bigger. So if you're someone who's been sort of on the fence about it, and you're like, oh, maybe I should finally take the plunge, like I said, now's a pretty darn good time to do it. And I highly recommend it. So yeah, be sure to check it out. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out over on social media, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.